Welcome back to OK Hobby Time. In this video, I'll be building abandoned industrial terrain for Warhammer 40k or any other tabletop game that takes place in the dystopian future. This build utilizes leftover junk with simple building techniques and is a great way to fill up a table cost effectively. I start off by finding a suitable bottle that can be used as a tank. I've been hoarding these isopropyl bottles from my 3D printing for this very moment. The other main component of this build are these plastic toy pipes. You can find these for fairly cheap online and in bulk as well. At this point, I'm just playing around and seeing what can be done to combine these with the bottles. I opted for a single pipe going from the top to the ground and decided two tanks side by side would make for a nice build overall. I'm rebuilding the piping to be attached at the middle so it looks a bit more considered for the two tanks. There are countless options that can be made with these toy pipes and empty bottles. This is what I decided to go with for this build. I wanted to remove the stickers so they didn't show up once painted, but they were really stuck on and being difficult. A solution to this is a heat gun that softens the glue and makes removing the stickers no problem. An alternative to this would be using a hairdryer or just being okay with leaving the stickers on. Next, I'll be cutting up some cardstock to give the tank some extra detailing. Cereal boxes are perfect for this type of work. I'm making sure to be as even as possible since these are meant to look machined. There's a lot of tension on these cardstock pieces, so I'll be using stronger glue than what I normally use. Super glue or a hot glue gun would work best in this situation. Super glue accelerator is sprayed on to lock everything in place. These bands break up the otherwise flat surface of the tanks and will help in the painting stage once highlights and shadows are added. These dollar store jewel stickers make for perfect rivets and come in a variety of sizes. Even though they're stickers, I prefer to glue them in place for extra durability. I'm making sure to be as even as possible with the placement of the glue so the rivets look more convincing. I'm always fascinated with what can be found at the dollar store for tabletop crafting. It's easy to find something that will plus up a build or inspire something new entirely. The next step is to create a base for the tanks. I'm using a miniature here to help with proportions. I want the perimeter of this terrain piece to be at least one base width in size. I'm bringing up my hot wire cutter to size down this piece of XPS foam, but any suitable material for the base would work here, including cardboard, foam board, MDF, or chipboard. I decided to add some tiling to this base to make it look a bit more interesting. I did this by scoring some lines in the foam with my hobby knife and then going back over them with a dull pencil to emphasize the gaps. Rolled up tinfoil is used to add some weathered texture. I liked how this base turned out, but it wasn't really the aesthetic I originally had in mind. I'm going to show you guys another base option, but we'll get to that in a sec. I noticed my cardstock bands slipping, so I locked them in place with some super glue and accelerator. This next part was completely optional, but I thought it'd be nice to add some 3D printed details in between the two tanks. I found a computer console from the creator SevinUnited on Thingiverse that fit the build perfectly. Back to the base. The tiles were just too big for what I had in mind. I used my hot wire table to remove the tiles and to be safe for a future craft. Instead, I'll be using drywall tape, which is incredibly useful for creating a graded texture on any base material. This tape is made up of a bunch of gridded material that works perfect for miniatures at this scale. It's also easy to apply since it has its own adhesion on one side. I'm being careful not to overlap the tape and continue the pattern as best as possible for a more consistent look. I trimmed the excess by flipping over the floor and putting pressure on the base while using my hobby knife. Similar to the previous floor, texture is added with rolled up tinfoil. It's time to glue everything together. Since gravity is working with me on these pieces, I use quick dry wood glue. This gives me a good amount of working time and a solid bond once dried. The same glue was used on the pipe section as well. For some instant adhesion, I place a bit of super glue in select spots and hit it with some accelerator. It's time to put the consoles in. There's going to be one of these on either side. I find that bits like these really help add scale to a build and can make a scratch-built terrain piece look like a store-bought kit. Before moving on, I let everything dry overnight to make sure the build is solid. It's time for paint. Smooth plastic is tough to prime with a brush, so I'm opting for a spray primer instead. I'll be using two colors for this process, black and flat red, and I'll be doing this outside to avoid spraying indoors. To achieve this look, I first primed the entire terrain piece in black. Once dried, I sprayed flat red lightly from above. Doing this maintains the black color in the shadows and provides great dimension to the paint job. Green contrast paint is going to be used to tint the build and start making this industrial terrain piece look abandoned. I'm using an airbrush here, but this part could be easily done with a normal brush as well. The contrast paint is applied in areas where water would build up or leak. This is where the cardstock bands and rivets become useful, since I can use them as origin points for this effect. Now that the shadows are applied, I'm switching over to some bright green paint to really push the effect. I'm using the previous darker green as a guide for where to place this new color. To add some color contrast and extra detail to the build, I decided to add some large numbers using a stencil. This wasn't the cleanest application since my white paint was watered down too much, but I embraced it and considered it a part of the weathered aesthetic. I decided to stencil each tank, giving this industrial unit its own number. Next, I'm going to be pushing the greenery further by mixing coarse flock with PVA glue. This mixture creates a paste that resembles moss and can be applied throughout the terrain piece. I'm applying this evenly throughout the build, using my fingers to smear the moss in select spots. The final step for the greenery is foliage. The scenic material matches the coarse flock and has a vertical look to it that's perfect for hanging off the build. The trim of the base is painted black to prep for the next step. Yellow paint is applied evenly to create hazard stripes, which will help add some extra contrast to the overall look of the terrain piece. The final weathering step is going to be pigment powder made from a pastel. A set like this is a really cost-effective way of getting a bunch of colors to weather miniatures with. I shave down the pastel with my hobby knife, then apply the powder with an old brush. I'm placing this powder vertically, then using my fingers to blend everything in. This gives the terrain piece a streaky, weathered look. And with that done, this terrain piece is complete. I'm happy to have finally found a use for my leftover bottles, and I look forward to applying these techniques to more random things that I've been hoarding. That wraps up this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.